Hey guys, Jay here, smarthelping.com. We've got another financial model in the renewable energy space. This model is purely focused on operations. It should be pretty simple to use for anybody. There's not a whole lot of complexity on there's no three statement model here. It's just a monthly essentially income statement and cash flow. Before I get into how it works, it's for solar panel installations of commercial or residential property, and there's a deployment schedule here up to 200 tranches. Let's talk about what's actually happening. Uh, so let's say you're a property owner, okay? You own a bunch of properties and you want to save the earth and go green, which is great. A lot of companies are moving towards this, and it's good. You're not that concerned with, as long as the energy costs are comparable to regular electricity, you're thinking that, well, that's fine, but I would like to source it from the sun instead of the grid or the, regular electricity sources that are not renewable. So what our company business over here does, this solar business, there's the sun, comes over and says, I will install solar panels for you guys, however they look, for free. You don't have to pay for it. But I, as but the property owners will pay the electricity that they use based on a power purchase agreement back to me as a business. And I ran into this. This is from a client who wanted to build this model out. Awesome client, really cool. And so this is what we're talking about. So I come in, I say, okay, I'll install all your guys' solar panels across the whole country, and I'll do it at my own cost, but then all the electricity that you can generate from this, you pay for what you use at a certain defined price, and you're so that the usage is like maybe you only use 50% of what's produced or 80% or whatever. That's going to be configurable in the model. And then whatever's left, you still send to the business here, my solar business, still collects the rest of that energy and then just sells it to the grid, usually at a cheaper price. So all the electricity that's produced goes to the business that did the installation for free. They sell that. Well, they get all the excess, and then you're paying them for whatever you use. So you're essentially you're paying for energy, and usually these purchase agreements will last for about 10 years or so. It could be 20 years, 25 years, and maybe you get a lower rate, and all that stuff is also configurable in the model. Um, and then once you're done with the agreement, as the property owners here that got the free install, you don't have to pay anything after that, except for obviously if you want a new panel put in or you need repairs and maintenance or whatever, what have you, which could be other ancillary services. Now, the model I just built to model this type of transaction out is goes for a max of 10 years, and usually the minimum length of these power purchase agreements is 10 years, but you can configure it to be any length. And like, let's say you only did it for 60 months, and then after that, you get no more revenues, and you have no more direct costs with um, that installation. Then it just zeroes out after that. But the model goes for up to 10 years, and I guess now you have a sense of what's going on. So let's look at the actual model. What I did, and this is the client wanted this, and I thought it was interesting. Instead of having some kind of general customer configuration and scaling the count of installs you're doing based on those configurations, we have individual rows for each installation. So this is like a rooftop here. So each row is a single rooftop or a property that you're installing for. There's up to 200. However, you can control each section. So each is a section of 10. The first row of each section is editable. Well, the whole thing is editable, but you're supposed to only change these input cells, and that will just, so if I put this to like 10, you can see, okay, now these all updated to 10 below it, the 9 below this one. And what you can do, if we roll this up, you can see these are just well, now there's 20 sections you can configure, and each section is a duplicate of the section you're putting here, and there's 10 of those. So there's 200. Now, let's say this was a rollout installation of, say, not one, but 10 or 20. So this is 20, this is 20, this is 20. You're going to do this set of 20. You can adjust all these different inputs. So you'd basically want to adjust the megawatt hours, the annual megawatt hours expected to be produced, and the total cost would be changed based on how many you're doing in this row, if it's just one or if it's like 5 or 10. And that's how you can use this model to scale to potentially thousands without having to go down thousands of rows, is just assume maybe each row is 10 installations. So maybe this is, instead of 15,000, it's 150,000. You can put an average lead time. Maybe it takes you 6 months to get everything up, or 5 months or whatever, and then revenue starts. You can finance a certain percentage of it. Here's what the price is, the starting price, and then we'll have schedules for how that can change over time. There is a price cap in effect as well, so whatever the price changes up to, it will never go above the cap. And then here you can define the percentage of that energy that's being produced by the solar panels that were installed, how much of that is used by the customer, which will drive revenue from this. And also the rest of it, excess, you can sell to the grid for this price. And that's also going to have adjustable schedule for pricing changes over time. So you're installing these, you're financing some of it, you're coming up with your own equity, and that's adjustable on each tranche. So you can adjust all these variables on each row if you wanted to. I tried to make it easier by doing it for every 10 drives to 9 below it, but you could put any numbers in here you want. You don't have to use the formulas, and it will work just fine. There's also this section, so this is your ongoing annual costs for things like maintenance, insurance, other things. I did 5 different costs here, and again, these are annual costs, and then this is the monthly cost for this row. So we're adding all these up, 12,500 a month divided by 12. This is your monthly cost for these items, and that will obviously scale as you deploy more. This cost starts to go up, and obviously revenue also starts to go up. Here over to the right is just some calculations to understand how the price per kilowatt hour sold to the customer changes by over time, as well as the price sold to the grid, and also the change in your cost for variable running costs, which is this initial starting amount, and how that might change, because these insurance costs could go up over time. Obviously, maintenance might go up over time. So that's the general deployment schedule, how it works. You can put any start month in here. Just make sure it's always the first day of whatever month and year you're putting. But this is not super specific like in my other models. It's a little bit more strict. This is looser because the whole model is just based on month numbers. So if you look at the monthly detail and annual details, just based on 10, 12 month periods and what you're doing in those months based on your deployment schedule here. You can pick the installation month, so you could have a bunch being installed in month 1, a bunch in month 5, etc., all the way out and scale out over time, and everything updates dynamically. Here's your schedules tab. So this is how you can change your kilowatt hours, how much you're going to increase that by per year. Here's how much your OPEX costs increase, and by OPEX, this is the direct variable costs per install right here. So this section, and this drives how much that goes up by every 12 months. Your kilowatt hour rate increases for the grid. So you got customers, grid, and then here, very important, this is seasonal in most areas that have sun some of the year, not sun some of the year. You can define how much of the maximum or the expected annual capacity that's achieved, how much of that is attained in each month of the year. Obviously, this is January, and 12 would be December. And that's somewhat why it is important to put a month number in here, or a month, because we are going to look up in our monthly detail what month this is in order to reference this proper schedule to know, because month number 1 in the model might not be January. It could be, in this case, it's August. So when we do our calculations about kilowatts sold to the customer, we need to know, and this is the formula to figure out how much of it is being produced, the annual capacity in each month. And then we're also multiplying by 1,000 because it's in megawatts on the deployment schedule, but we're selling and pricing in kilowatt hours. So there's a conversion. That's how that works. All these tabs over here, M112, are just all the ways that all of these assumptions work over time and become dynamic. The financing, which are general term loans with a P&I and a repayment amortization period, and no on the exit, it's assumed that there's some exit value based on, if we look at this kind of cash flow analysis, whatever month the exit year is defined here, let's say it's like year 6, any remaining debt will be repaid. The exit value is based on a multiple of EBITDA, annual EBITDA multiple. I'll get more into this later, but that's there. So we got deployment, schedules, corporate overheads. Here's where you're going to cover things like maybe manager costs, legal costs, just ongoing monthly expenses. You can pick the month that those start. And on here, you're going to define the annual cost expected. And half of this is driven by an annual growth rate, meaning you could just put, okay, what if this is, $500 a month, and it automatically goes up by whatever percentage is put in column N each year. The other half is manually defined because it's possible you have fixed expenses, but you need to, either they don't increase or you want to manually drive how they change over time and not just put a percentage. So at a high level, it works similar to how I normally do it, but it's on an annual basis. So you're putting the annual count in here, and then we've got half of it has drivers for growth. The other half is manually input per year what the cost is. Okay, executive summary. Here we can see our annual cumulative installations, how many kilowatt hours were sold, power purchase agreement revenue, which is selling the energy back to the customer and to the grid if there's excess. Your direct costs, these again are these costs here on the deployment schedule right here. All of that is represented in these direct costs. You got your gross profit, corporate overheads, then you've got total expenses, which is right now it's just overheads, EBITDA, debt service coverage ratio, gross profit margin, other cash flow items. These are your installation costs. Here's your financing cost, which is debt service. You've got your loan proceeds, so how much of the installation cost are you financing, and you're paying interest on it over time. And usually you would do that to try to scale quicker. It's more risky, obviously, but requires less capital. Then we've got finally a loan repayment and an exit value as well. We've got IRR down here, the project, equity required, project cash returned, equity multiple. This is just a check here. Monthly details a little bit more in depth on where the revenue is coming from, all your different costs, and then it's still flowing down to cash flow, minimum cash position. This is how much you would need to survive the operational period, debt balance, and debt service coverage ratio. The annual details the same as the monthly, just on an annual basis. And you can see how all this is updated, like this is 6 years. If I change this back to, let's say, 9, we go back to the annual detail. Now we've got operations up to the 9th year. Same with the monthly. You can see it will stop after the 9th year. So that's nice and neat. Executive summary, same deal. We go back here. Let's just put it to 10. Maybe change the exit multiple to a 6x EBITDA. Now, the exit multiple is going to be tricky because it depends on how much you're scaling and when on the actual operations, and how much of the existing contract value is left for all the customers, as well as, if someone's buying this company from you, they're buying a brand. So there's some value. So to me, I just put a basic EBITDA multiple on this figure. There's probably a whole bunch of different ways that you could value this business, but here I just tried to peg it to the exit year's EBITDA multiple. You could do discounted cash flow analysis, put in discount rate, get the net present value. Here's your IRR and equity multiple. I also did a sensitivity. Now this will cause the model to run a little bit slower. So if you want it to run faster, like here you can see if I input something, it takes a second. So 6, see how it hangs for like just a second. If you don't care about the sensitivities, you could clear out these and just highlight them and hit clear all. And this will run a lot faster. You could watch now when I hit enter, no hang. It's instant. So that's the only thing with the sensitivity tables is they do take up a lot of Excel's power because it's essentially running the model in the background for all these different iterations. So it's running this entire model 16 times to figure out, okay, here's what the IRR is if everything in the model is the same and you change the exit year and the EBITDA multiple. Here's your resulting IRR. Same with the net present value sensitivity, but this is doing changes in discount rate and EBITDA multiple and how that affects the net present value of the project. So I think that's important to know. Everything else, I mean, you could scale this even if you wanted to just drag the bottom rows down. You could just highlight this bottom row here all the way across. You want all of this all the way to column BC and hit the bottom right corner, and you could drag this down as far as you wanted. I think the base is set for 1,000, but you could extend that too for each of these M1, M2 tabs. You can see here this sums up to 1,000 by default. It's only got 200 right now. But you can drag all of these M1, M2 tabs. You also would go to the bottom, just highlight the bottom row all the way over to the end. And you can drag this down if you wanted to extend it, as far as however you wanted to go down to account for more deployments. And you'd have to do that on every single one of these tabs. There's 12 of them. And then make sure the top is still summing up all the rows if you drag it further than 1,000. Now I feel like Excel would handle this just fine for maybe a couple thousand rows, even up to maybe 5 or 10,000. However, you might have to remove these sensitivity tables if you do that, because then it's doing all of that extra calculations this many more times, so it might get really slow. But if you remove these, I think it'd be fine at 5 or 10,000 if you wanted to get that granular. If not, I mean, you could even just use this first 10 tranches and just say, well, I'm going to do 100 tranches on each one, so that's 1,000 tranches of homes, and see what the economics look like of that. And start having different start months for each one, and everything. You could adjust all these variables. Up top here, you can see as you change variables here, the revenue, gross profit, and cash flow and minimum investment will change. So, for example, let's say this installation cost was 30,000 per for the first 10. You can see now my cost just went up my minimum investment went up to 380 from 293. No change in revenue. Things that would change revenue would be mainly the megawatt hours production. So if this went up to like 200, you see now that all that revenue changes. Obviously the pricing. Debt service will affect the cash flow, the interest rate, and how much you're financing. So if I finance more, my cash requirement goes down a little bit. I still got to pay interest and principal back, so that only went down a little bit. It's only a tenth of the whole deployment schedule in this example. Term, we probably have a 5-year, at least a 5 or 10-year term on these. But you'll go through and put all the inputs in that are relevant to your strategy and your scenario. The numbers I have in here now are just arbitrary. They don't mean anything. Let's see. Well, I think we touched on, the last thing, visuals. So installations completed, total installations, how many kilowatt hours you've sold to customers, and the revenue from that. how many kilowatt hours you've sold to the grid and the revenue from that. And then on these two, I also showed a comparison of how many kilowatt hours are sold customers versus to the grid, and then a stacked that shows the total revenue, but how much of that is to the from customers versus the grid. Then we've got total revenue, total kilowatt hours sold in aggregate, EBITDA, gross profit, and gross profit margin, annual cash flow, cumulative cash flow. This will show you when you kind of start to break even and start to save. And again, you might want to start deploying more rapidly as you're starting to build cash flow, and you can scale even more. However, you want to strategize this 10-year project. Debt balance over time. See, that starts to get paid back once we stop scaling. Debt service coverage ratio, average cash flow per customer per year, average EBITDA per customer per year. Alrighty, so that's it. I think it's actually a very usable template. A lot of people who come in here use this, and it does some complex things. I think the dynamic financing for each deployment is important. Obviously, the growth in pricing and of kilowatt hours, this breakdown of customers versus grid is important. The dynamic schedules, all this stuff. So it's very usable, and it's another model in the renewable energy space, which I'm very happy to do. So we will be, if you go over to the site, you want to download this, it's in the description blocks below. Also, smarthelping.com. I will put it obviously on here. Where's that bundle? Renewable energy 125. So there's already a hydropower model in here, a wind farm, biogas, EV charging stations. So this will be another one. Will be solar panel installation. I think this is a pretty good one. You can also buy all. It'll be included in this bundle as well, the industry specific, which has all sorts of financial models for all kinds of different industries. Check it out. And if you want everything I've ever built, you can go to the All Financial Models tab at the top, download the full library for $9.99. I've got over 200 unique financial models, and not just startup models. There's also a lot of joint venture cash flow waterfalls where you plug in data at the top about contributions and distributions and different preferred returns and all that. It does all the logic for you and shows you GP and LP distributions. And I've got some for IRR hurdles, simple prefs, equity multiple hurdles, all sorts of things in that. And there's just a lot of spreadsheet work I've done for probably over 1,000 clients now across all of the different platforms. But there's just tons of value here if you're looking to get into forecasting or looking at unit economics of all different types of businesses. So check it out. I'm going to upload this today and, well, tomorrow, I guess, and you guys will see this tomorrow. But it'll be up when you see the video to download. And yeah, I think this is a really great model. Suggestions welcome as well if you have ideas for improvements. And remember, I do custom work for $195 an hour if you want to hire me. Usually 24 to 48 hour turnarounds. So I'm pretty quick, and I've got a lot of knowledge and experience to base different frameworks around if you're trying to model out a business. Alrighty, like and subscribe. See you guys on the next one.